So welcome everyone. Today we're looking at how to import milk recording results in Uniform and how to see the data that's made available to us. What kind of analysis you can get for somatic cell count, for overall milk recording results. So Emily, I'm leaving the floor to you. I'll just monitor the questions from the people, and yeah, if you have any questions, you want to voice it out, just unmute your microphone and ask away.
Perfect. So to start our webinar, we're going to go over just how to, well, first of all, what is imported when we import our milk recording results, and then how to import it in UNIFORM-Agri. So what is imported? What's imported is going to be our milk production, our somatic cell count, protein, fat percentage. If ever you exchange also your urea or your BHB, that'll also be imported with milk control. A little side note, when importing the file, it is normal that you may notice a few cows that do not import. That's normal because often cows have been called between the time that you've made the milk recording and the time you've imported the actual milk recording into your software. So those cows will obviously not follow if they're not part of your software anymore. Next to that, we don't have slides about this, but basically, if ever you have trouble finding where to get these files to be imported, often it's known that the milk recording company will either send them by email, or now you're starting to get a web interface that you're able to go get them from. Often they'll be located in the electronic files, but if you ever have any troubles, feel free to call us on the support line, so it'll be our pleasure to help you find where that file is located. If ever you do not have access to that file though, then you will need to be in contact with your milk recording company to ask if it's possible to have an electronic file that's importable. So right now the most common file that is imported into Uniform is what we call a tip file. So to import this tip file, you must start by going to the cow head, into the links, and then into tab 3, which is the milk test update. Once you've gone into this tab, you'll be able to see the UMC wizard pop up with a series of files you can select from. The one we're looking for in this case is the Agri Canada milk recording file. So you can select that file and then click on next. And then the next wizard that we see here on the right on the screen will be what pops up. So you'll be able to click on the 3 little points that we see where my arrow is pointing and go find that file. Often will be located in your download file. A side note that's interesting also is once you've selected the Agri Canada file, the next times that you import your milk recordings, they'll also it'll already be pre-selected, so you don't have to go through the list every time and remember what exact file you need to import.
And also make sure to always, sorry to interrupt,
That's
but
fine.
to put a check mark besides calculate SPP, standard peak production, so that way all your SPP analysis are calculated right away during the import. And also 305 calculation, also very important.
Exactly. Once both those boxes have been checked and you have your file selected, you'll then be able to click on finish and you will see your file import. It's also been seen lately now that we have XML files that we import. I don't have a slide on this today, but if ever your file is not a TIP file or an XML file and you're not sure how to import that, just give us a call also on the support and we'll be able to assist you with importing that file. So now that we imported our milk recording, let's go see some of the analyses that are possible with the software. So we can first go on the cow head, on her data, and into the animal record. So this will already give us just a more individual look at the milk recording results. So you can just go in the milk recording tab here. And then a side note that's important is just to make sure milk recording has been selected here. Often another option will be selected and then we won't be able to see the milk recordings that have been imported. So we select milk recording over here, and then we can also select which lactation information we're looking for by just once again going in this list and selecting if it's the current lactation, previous one, or all lactations. We'll really have an overview of what milk recordings have been imported, at how many days of milk they were, and then just really their average production, fat, protein, and etc. What's also super interesting in the individual graph, animal record is that there's graphs available. So down here at the bottom right, I just clicked on graph, and then there's the SPP fat and protein graph. So what we'll see here is really where your cow situates itself based on the SPP on the left, and then also their trend with the fat and protein on their right. And then this is really a graph over, as you can see, the days in milk. So by just scrolling your mouse over the lines here, you'll also be able to see the date changing at the top here. So then that'll also give you an idea of where this information is coming from. So which milk control it's coming from. Another graph that's super interesting in the animal record is the somatic cell count, milk heat, and SPP. So once again, very similar to the graph we just looked at. So you'll have your somatic cell count here on the left, and then your kilos of milk per day and SPP on the right here. Once again, the graph shows over the days in milk. The date up here will change also based on where your cursor is on the graph. If we go back into the cow's head, we can go into milk management here and see our milk recording analyst. So this is a really practical tool to go right into after you've imported your milk control, because if you look right here at the top, the title will always put the last milk recording imported, so that'll also be a confirmation if the import has worked or not. Then here what we see on this table will really be an overall look of the cows that had information imported, so really their numbers, their lactation, which lactation they're in, days of milk, and their status. And then once again, like the individual animal record, you'll have their average kilos of milk, fat protein, fat to protein ratio, and their somatic cell count. Urea and BHB will also be shown here if those are information you exchange.
There's a question in the chat. Someone is asking, what does the red color means on the animal number there, the animal ID?
Yeah, so the red numbers on the animal ID is something that we can associate based to a health event. So often I would say in this particular herd, we used it for cows that had staph infection. So once they've been declared with staph as a health event, they've associated that color in the health event, so that color will follow them throughout the whole software.
Yep, I get a thumbs up by Martin. Thank you.
Perfect. Also, speaking about red, we have a couple of numbers here that have red factors on them. This is just to illustrate that there's a variation based on the standard. The standard can be predetermined by yourself, actually. So to do so, you can go into your properties here at the bottom right, and then go into the attentions here. So this will really be the default standards that UNIFORM put in, but it's really up to you and your herd what you would like. So you can really change the somatic cell count, standards for your first lactations and your cows, fat to protein ratio, pH weight, etc. Also, what's interesting in the properties is if you go back into general, this part right here where it says section, you can, once you have a few milk recordings imported, you'll actually be able to go back in time and look at previous milk recordings if ever that's something you need or would like to have a look at. It's always possible to go back and just change which milk recording you'd like to have a look at. Another analyze that's super interesting in our software, if we go back to the cow head here, in our health and treatment, is the somatic cell count analyze. So once again, we see here the red has followed us over. So once again, in this case, it's really just to represent the cows that are staff. So we'll see the general information about our cows here. Then we'll see the last test results in the first columns here. And then what's interesting about here is we'll also see the cell counts from all other, well, the last few milk recordings that we've imported. So you really can see over time how your somatic cell counts have been progressing. Here in times, I think is also a very interesting information. So this will be your ratio of how many times your cow has had a high somatic cell count based to the amount of times that they've had milk control actually affected or milk recording. So if I take just this cow over here, so 335, we see that she's had 8 milk recordings so far that's been imported in UNIFORM, and out of those 8, 6 times she's had a high somatic cell count. And then the last column here I also find super interesting. So it really gives you an overview of what the somatic cell count has as an impact into your ball tank. So really for that cow based onto your whole herd. So like right here, we have cow 36 that we see here has had quite a few high somatic cell counts, but overall only has an impact of about 1% in our ball tank. So what this represents is that based on her milk production, although she's had very high cell counts, she's not producing enough to really have a major impact on our ball tank. As for our cow 234 here, has had only a few high somatic cell counts, but has a much bigger impact on our ball tank because she's a much higher, or in a higher peak of her production right now.
And I guess you can sort by percentage there, right?
Yep. It's also possible to sort just by clicking here on the total.
Highest contributors. Yeah.
We'll be able to sort this way. Another factor here, so kind of like our milk recording analyst that's interesting, is we have a few colors that are available in our list here. So it'll be red representing newly infected cows. Green is what the software has considered are cured cows. So often a cow that's had a high infection and then had a medication entered in their health events, and then their somatic cell counts have decreased, will be considered cured. And then cows with just high somatic cell counts one after another will become purple because they're considered chronic. And last little note, these little red lines I think are very interesting also to know. They represent when you've entered a mastitis event in their health record. So then have you had a mastitis event and you wonder if they've had an impact on your somatic cell count, you'll really be able to see, because based on that month, if there's a little line and then a high count, you'll know that they are linked together or not. On this same graph, table, we're able to go see graphs here at the bottom right corner. So if we click on here, there's a few graphs available here, but we'll only go over 2 of them today. If ever I invite you to go see the other graphs, and if ever you have questions, just to call the support line and be really happy to help you out with that. So the first one here is really just an overview of the table we just looked at in general. So just much more of a visual of which cows are in which somatic cell count breakdown. Also, what I find super interesting with this graph is that we can separate them based on lactation. So really have a view of just our first lactation, second, and etc. The second graph that I thought would be very interesting to go over is the somatic cell count comparison. So it'll be on our left-hand axis here. It's our previous milk recording, so about 2 months ago. And then the current milk recording we've had is here at the bottom. So again, like we saw in the first table, our colors are following. So the green represents healed, new infections for the red, purple represents what we consider chronic. And then all these little red dots really represent your herd that's had a milk recording. So if we use our mouse and just go over one of these little red dots, on the right, you'll be able to see the animal's information. So animal number, lactation number, and days in milk. And then we'll be able to see why she's situated here. So right now we see that this current milk recording, she's close to the 750 cell count. As for if we follow her back over to her previous one, she was a lot closer to the 100 cell count. So this is why now she's situated in the red square. So like we see in this graph right now, most of our herd is either in the green and the white, and that's what we hope for in most situations. So another thing that I think is interesting in this graph is you can, once again, like the first graph we just went over, just look at certain lactations, so first lactations, second, and etc. And then here in the dates, you can also decide to compare different milk recordings. So you'll have the option here of a few different milk recordings that you can click on and then compare also. Anything you'd like to add, Matt?
No, that's crystal clear. And yeah, I have comments going that way as well. So very well done, Em.
Perfect. So yeah, overall, I would say that's going to cover what we're going to see today for analysts, well, analyzes on our milk recordings, but feel free to call the support line if ever you have any more questions.
All right. I don't see any questions, so yeah. Well, thanks, Em, and thanks everyone for taking the time. We'll see you next Friday.